Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library. And today I have two great marketers, and they are also in the podcast space. Now, this is very important for a lot of business owners because people are always looking for how do I effectively get the message out about my business, my product, and you can do it through many ways in marketing. And podcasting is becoming a very, very popular and very attractive way to do it. But there are some good things you should consider before that. And so I'm glad to have Alan Briggs and Jonathan Collier on to talk about their background, their business, the great things they're doing with their podcast boot camp. So welcome to the show, gentlemen.
It's glad to be here. I'm glad to hang out with you.
Thanks for having us, man. We love talking about this stuff. So let's do this.
Absolutely. Now, before we jump into the details of, like I said, the podcast boot camp and your current marketing business and the podcast you guys lead, can you tell us a little bit about your backgrounds and kind of what led you to starting those things?
Yeah, well, so let me start because I think why we're doing what we're doing largely comes out of what we didn't know. And so I began to coach leaders and began to see that clarity actually brought breakthrough for leaders. They could take their next steps, they could activate. And I've always been doing that. But once I began to commit certain amounts of time to that on the side, that's actually where Jonathan and I met. I went on a podcast. I've also written 3 books and I do some ghostwriting as well. And so I've always been communicating messages out to people, but I've always thought that marketing was salesy. And I've seen it done in so many poor ways. I think I've been scarred, Terrell, from the ways that it's been done badly. And so I just thought, man, I don't want to be in sales. Well, I didn't realize if you have a message, then you're a marketer. You have to be a marketer. And so I began to be disappointed by some of the things that publishers didn't put into my message and think there's got to be better ways to put this out there. Well, meanwhile, I'm getting great feedback on my Facebook page from things like questions that I ask, getting great engagement through coaching, word of mouth is spreading. So I just needed somebody to help me understand, here's what marketing is, here's what it isn't, here's how to do it well, here's what clear, concise marketing looks like that isn't weird or isn't salesy. So essentially, I created the organization that I wanted to have. And Jonathan and I have done that together. It's called High Touch Marketing. And we already had a podcast called Right Side Up Leadership Podcast aimed at leaders. And so we thought we don't want to cram this into that podcast. We actually want to start a separate podcast called The Everyday Marketer. And it's essentially for people that have a message that is deeply imprinted on their mind or their heart, their team, their business, whatever that message is they want to get out to the world. They just don't know how, and they do not see themselves as professional marketers. So we demystify marketing for people so that they can find a clear pathway, take their next steps. So ultimately their message can get out to more eyes, ears, and hearts. I mean, that for us is it. So Jonathan, sorry to steal your thunder, man, but what'd you add to
that? I would just say you're spot on. You can read more about how we started the business, and we say it was out of an accident, really. Over if you go to our website, and we'll leave information there. But both of us have worked in 3 spaces. We've both worked in the ministry space, the nonprofit space, and the business space. And while all 3 areas work independently of one another, there's some similar pain points that exist in all 3 areas, which is limited time, limited energy, and limited funds to take what you have that you are passionate about, the message that you can't afford not to communicate, but on the same token, you can't afford to go broke telling it. And so that leaves many people wondering, where do I turn? Because then you fall victim to the comparison game of looking at this organization over there and their 200,000 Facebook followers and all that they're doing. But what you fail to see is what's below the surface of the water. So just because what they're doing that's working for them doesn't mean that you can experience success in the digital space, but you're going to have to go about it differently. And just because you can't do it the way they're doing it doesn't mean that it's out of reach, out of touch, and that you're going to have to go broke and be a poor steward of your resources to grow your brand in the digital space. So that's where we live. Like Alan said, we want to demystify the process. We want people to know that marketing isn't transactional, it's relational. We don't look at people as curating leads. We want to cultivate relationships and establish trust and make people what we call raving fans of your brand, so that they do some of the marketing for you. Once they're sold out, they're like, man, those guys, they're the small business marketing guys. And if you need help, you've got to go find them. Whether you're in the marketing space or you're, mom and pop's country store, like if you want good customer service, you need to go get what they have. And so those are largely the principles that we teach. And the subset of the podcast is really a brand within a brand. And it's everything that everyday leaders can do every single day to grow their brands.
And I think this is a very interesting thing that you guys brought up with, I guess you said you had one podcast and you decided to lead off with another. I mean, and I know you mentioned about like not wanting to cram the marketing in with the leadership. What was some of like, I guess you say the thought process behind like, hey, it's a smart idea to keep these two separate? Because I often find that, some people like they have a little slightly different message and they just try to put it all together. But what was kind of the thing that triggered for you guys like, hey, it's smarter to separate these?
Yeah. Well, let me give you, there's actually other things as well, because Jonathan and I do some things on the side underneath our own personal brand. So we lead two companies together, and then separately, we also have some things that we're excited about. So I think it's really important to have differentiation in the market, but I think it's more important to have consistency and clarity. Here is what we do. Here's who we help, and here is how we help them. Here are the pain points. And so what I've found is that like you say, a lot of businesses say, we'll do that. Why? Because someone's going to pay you. Of course. Now I would say, hey, if you're a starving anything, find a way to get food, right? Find a way to accept someone's money and do that, especially in that bootstrapping phase. And so there are jobs that Jonathan will take on the side because they just make sense for his family. He gets excited about them. There are jobs that I just take on the side that I absolutely love doing, but don't make sense to fit within the full mission of either Stayforth Designs or our team at High Touch Marketing. And so I think it's really important to differentiate and to have multiple brands, as opposed to just saying, we'll throw everything underneath that umbrella. And I just think it clouds the water, and that isn't helpful for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you create confusion, especially when you're dealing with things that are so opposite of one another, granted, we take principles from the leadership space and have adapted them into our marketing business because it's who we are. A lot of those principles are naturally who we are. But when you take things that are so polar opposite of one another and you try and fit them into the same box, all it's going to do is it's going to confuse the people that you're trying to reach. And instead of them taking next steps to get to know you more, they're not going to know what to do. And they're going to go to the next thing, because let's face it, no one is the only person doing the thing they're doing in the digital space or even in the physical space. And so if you're not as clear as possible to where people can get to you with as much ease as possible, they're going to go to the next search item on Google or to the next business down the street that provides a similar service because they're a percentage more clear with their messaging and their intent.
Well, and let's hang on clarity there for a second, because everybody goes around. I've been to business networking stuff, and I mean, most of it's bogus, right? Dumpster fire of this and that, throwing business cards at each other. And I mean, maybe not throw, man. I mean, maybe you have some awesome BNI groups or whatever, but like most of it is just junk. When someone goes around the table, it's like, I'm a coach. I mean, how many times have you heard that? But when I say I help leaders overcome overwhelm and avoid burnout, people go, oh, dang. And I've immediately said, here's who I'm for. I'm not here to coach you how to make $8 million. That ain't me. And I've never done that. Maybe someday I'll say I can help people do it. That ain't today or anytime soon, probably. And so, but to me, I say, this is exactly where I want to aim. And people go, oh man, because you help them do blank. And so we're not the marketing agency for everybody. But if you're a small business who feels confused about how you market, doesn't feel like you have enough money, and you've been taken for a ride by a large marketing agency, then you're listening. Like, that is a conversation we need to have. Start with our podcast. Let's talk later. And if you are someone who wants to go on an adventure out in Colorado, especially where I live, and clarify your leadership while we have a ton of fun doing it, then I would love to take you on my own out to do that. So I think just start with the pain points and move backward instead of, here are all the services I can do if you ever pay me. That isn't fair. That doesn't work. And those kind of stores tend to die over time. And those kind of businesses, I don't know how to even talk about them. So we want to be the very specific pain points for very specific people.
Awesome. You know, and something else you guys talked about was that, that being in a situation where, you have a message that you need to get out, but you don't have a very big budget. And it stood out to me because that's the world that I lived in probably for like the first 6 years of my professional career. Like I worked during the daytime as an accountant, and then my other job I worked as a Christian church minister. And to where it's just like I lived in this world, and in the accounting firm I saw we had tons of money to market. When I went over to the church, it's like we didn't have as much. So when it comes down to like business owners that are like trying to figure out that way of, okay, how do I get my message out, when I don't really have a huge budget? I guess, does your podcast talk about that from their perspective or give them insight in that?
Yeah. And we're really excited about that. And it's why it's called the Everyday Marketer Podcast. Is each episode are really standalone tools. We purposely make the episodes 15 to 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. We answer the same 3 questions every episode. We tackle a topic that if you take what we discuss in that episode and you commit to applying it, you will gain traction and momentum. And some episodes are 2-part. We just finished a series that launched on content. First, we touched on why you need to have a content strategy, and then why you need to have a content calendar, especially if it's me, myself, and I that's doing the curation, creation, and delivery. And it's very practical. So you can apply what's spoken of in every episode, and you will see results from it. We have this joke that it's not snake oil. So if you're looking for snake oil, you're not going to find it.
We're thinking about starting a side hustle snake oil business because people at some point, you talk about marketing, there's just this distrust because people have tended to be burned by these large marketing agencies, and they mystify it, Terrell. They're like, well, you can't see behind the firewall of this, which I think is like, hey, we're actually not having that big of an impact, and you're not getting what you're paying for, so we don't want you to see it. They're like, oh, here are these algorithms, and they use these big words. And we have empowerment marketing, where we want to empower a woman or a man to fish, a small business owner to fish, because we get it. Jonathan and I understand if we're going to spend money on marketing, that's money I'm not feeding my family with or going on my next vacation. And here's what I totally believe is that if we overpromise and underdeliver, we are stealing from someone's family. Just straight up. That's who small business you steal from, not the man. You're stealing from someone's family. And so we try to always underpromise and overdeliver and go, hey, we got 15 more minutes for questions. How can we share from our own experience? Because I wish somebody would have shared from a normal perspective. Here are terms you understand. Here are next steps you can take to do guerrilla marketing, where you could actually do it yourself versus having to hire out the man. So we never want to lose that perspective on how precious this is and how stinking hard small business is to get off the ground and sustain.
Awesome. Now, speaking of that, like you said, the resources and helping people understand how can they actually get their hands in and do it as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the podcast boot camp and, what's the value that people walk away from those boot camps?
Yeah. So the podcast boot camp is one of a few courses that we'll have going on. So podcast boot camp is going on right now. As your listeners are watching this, it will probably have ended. But again, what we realize is that everyone wants to start one. A podcast is a amazing platform to communicate a message. And we live in a time in our culture where everybody has an opinion and everybody has a thought that everyone thinks needs to be out in front of as many people as possible. And podcasting just continues to grow. From a content side, it's all your content. You're free to do with it what you want. And so it's a place for creators to say, okay, I can distribute it. I can monetize. I can do whatever I want, however I want with it, because I have the rights to it. So like Alan said, as a resource, this is my 3rd podcast that I've done. And I wish that I had all the information right now when I went to start my first one, because there would have been less fear, less trepidation, much less overwhelm, and way more confidence going into it. And I would have probably saved a ton of money by not buying things and purchasing things that I didn't need to purchase to start a successful podcast. So that led into this. is anyone can start a podcast. Not everyone should. And if you think you're going to start one now or in the next 6 months, well, here's a framework that we walk through, that we use, that we're going to teach you through, that we utilize to help you plan, launch, grow, and sustain.
And people are looking for insider information. I mean, people want time-tested stuff from the trenches. So anyone listening to this, whatever questions people repeatedly ask you, you may want to build something in your business for that. You can build a course for that, at least do an episode or a Q&A on that. And by the way, on the podcast, after we did the boot camp, we do kind of a back it up to a 1.0 version. And so that's essentially the free version of the summary of what we gave out. We gave away gold there, but it just goes deeper. We dig deeper throughout a whole week. And so I just think that if people are asking you questions, then that means they want to know your answer to that, and you can solve or soothe their pain point. So I just had people answer or ask me all the time, how do you get guests on? How do you get them to say yes? How do you schedule them? Jonathan's getting the technical questions about, what about this hosting service? I'm like, I don't know anything. Ask Jonathan. How do we do this? And so we started helping people for free, and eventually realized we need to charge for this. People need to value this. Let's get the right people together. I think the last aspect is, how can you provide community? Because they're in a Facebook group interacting, and then afterwards people can jump in. So if you want to jump in the Everyday Marketer group, you can actually go do that. And we've got a free guide for you, and you can just be in there, learn from other great people. So I just think if you answer people's questions enough, you probably need to build something more sustainable than you just telling people and giving stuff away for free eventually. And something that's more sustainable for us is this podcast bootcamp, and also the community that people can help each other in that. So we try to kind of like fix all those pain points in one.
Awesome.
Yeah. Alan, just to finish up there, Alan said something important. We didn't just decide to go into a podcast class, or we don't decide to do like content creation classes. We'll pay attention to what you pay attention to, and listen to what the people that are invested in you are saying. And if enough people consistently come to you asking the same or similar questions, then you need to consider like, okay, the people that are following me want this. What does it look like to create it and do it well? So we'll largely operate under the realm of it's guilty until proven innocent. But when enough people start saying something, you're like, okay, do we have the time to commit to creating it? Can we create it well? And is there enough to say that's different than someone else, where we can add enough value to where they leave saying, okay, I'm going to go not only implement this, but I'm going to tell someone else that they need to go and do the same thing.
And maybe the last filter Jonathan and I have is, can 1 + 1 = 1,000,000 here? Like, Jonathan and I are so different, so similar heart, incredibly different passions, giftings, wirings. And so if we can both get excited about it and think, man, they need to learn from both of us, that makes sense for both of us to dedicate our time to. So I'm a huge fan of team when done right. I think team is either a genius multiplier or a genius diminisher. And so for Jonathan and I, us working together, we accomplish things we never could have done on our own or should have attempted on our own. And so that's a big thing, a filter that I think a lot more leaders should look at.
Awesome. So first, where can they find the Everyday Marketer on social media and on podcasts? Like, what are they looking for?
Yeah. So if you head over to Facebook and you just search out High Touch Marketing, give us a like and a follow there. You can also go to hightouchmarketing.net. That's our website. And you can check out all of our content. We have tools and resources available up there. You can look at the different services we offer. And the Everyday Marketer podcast, just head to theeverydaymarketer.com, and you'll see everything about the philosophy behind the podcast, why it's there. And you can subscribe to it on every major listening platform that's there. All we ask is that if you do, listen to a few episodes and then leave us a positive rating and review, because those help drive podcasts up through the platforms and make it to where more people see it.
Awesome. And then on the leadership one, how can they find that one?
Yeah, it's just stayforth.com. So don't go forth, Stayforth, STAYFORTH.com. We help leaders clarify their next steps and walk along with them as they take their next steps. And also, we do replenishing experiences for leaders, which is a fast growing thing for us. A lot of leaders are both tired and lonely. So we create replenishing experiences where you can connect with other leaders. And we love hosting those and curating those, but all that can be over at stayforth.com. And we're sister companies, so you can find both Jonathan and I on both of those, and those things are symbiotic and work together. So we'd love to serve you guys in one of those areas.
Awesome. And I know that the podcast boot camp will probably be over by the time this airs, but if you guys are doing another one, where should people look out to see if you guys are going to be doing another one?
Yeah. So if you go to everydaymarketer.com, you can snag a free download. That'll be recurring. It's a podcast launch checklist that we put together. That's everything we think through and all the non-negotiables. From there, there'll be a button you can click that's join the bootcamp. So it'll be, as of Friday, it'll become an evergreen course. And then whether you snag the download or purchase the course, you'll get access into the podcast bootcamp, which is the community we're creating to bring podcasters from all walks of life into this community to learn together, grow together, network, guest on other people's podcasts, to cross promote, to help each other launch. So you can find all the information at everydaymarketer.com, and you can just click on, there's a button that says Podcast Bootcamp.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, one last question I'll ask, and we'll go one from each. So when you think about where you've been and you think about where you guys are now and all the ups, the downs, the victories, the seeming defeats and everything that has gone into your journey, what's one lesson that each of you would share with other business owners?
All right, I'll start us off. Consistency breeds credibility. Consistency breeds credibility. Another way to say it is take your next right steps, keep taking your next right steps, and eventually people will want to take a walk with you.
Nice.
Look at each person as a relationship and not a transaction. And also don't look at other people as competition. Instead of being competitive, collaborate. Yes, you're fighting to grow and get ahead, but sometimes the greatest gains in life come from collaborating with someone who's a little bit different or a little bit further along than you.
Awesome. Well, Alan and Jonathan, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed the good discussion. Really enjoyed having you, and definitely thank you for all the great things you guys are doing and putting all these amazing resources out there for on the marketing side, the leadership side, the podcasting side. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.